Hey, what's going on? Brian Kelly here from Zombie Guitar. In this video I want to talk about the 5 pentatonic positions and the CAGED system. So at some point in your life you may have realized that, some of the CAGED shapes sometimes line up with the pentatonic positions. Note how I said sometimes. So that definitely is the case sometimes, but sometimes it's not the case. So that's why if you try and associate a particular CAGED shape with a specific pentatonic position and say that that's always going to be true, you're going to find yourself, playing wrong notes a lot, and just stuff isn't going to make sense. So that's what this video is about. So let me just demonstrate what I'm talking about, and then I want to get into the theory behind all this stuff. So what you see here is the 5 pentatonic positions for the key of C major. It's right here between the 5th and 8th fret. That's your position number 1. So if you start on the note C, which is right here, 8th fret, right where my pinky is, and then you play C to C, that's going to be your C major pentatonic scale. If you start here underneath your first finger, that's the note A. So playing A to A within this pattern, that's the A minor pentatonic scale. So that's position number 1. So everything, you have your position number 1 here, your position 2, 3, 4, and then 5, and then back at 1 again. So you're going to see that within each of these pentatonic positions, you have a CAGED shape that fits perfectly. So if you wanted to play the C major chord in the G shape, which would be right here, that falls perfectly in line with pentatonic position number 1. So you have your note C, your note E, G, C, E, G, C. C, E, G is what makes up the C major chord. All your C's, E's, and G's are right here, forming the G shape, which overlaps perfectly with pentatonic position number 1. And then if you move up to position number 2, which is this, you'll see that your C major chord is in the E shape. So that lines up perfectly too. And then if you move up to position number 3, you have your C major chord in the D shape. So the D shape is this. And then you move up to position 4. Your C major chord is in the C shape. And then position 5, you have your C major chord in the A shape. And then you're back at position number 1 again. And then your C major chord is in the G shape again. So you see that all 5 of these pentatonic positions have a CAGED shape that fits perfectly with it. So that's all well and good if you're in the key of C major and you're looking for a C major chord. All right, so in the key of C major, the C major chord, this stuff lines up. But let's assume you want to switch the key now. Let's say you want to play in the key of G major. Your pentatonic position number 1 is now going to be up here between the 12th and 15th fret. So here's your G major pentatonic scale. All right, so that's your position number 1. And then if that's 1, 2 would be here, 3, 4. Or if this is 1, this would be 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So the positions of the pentatonic have switched based on the key. But in the key of G major, you have, 3 major chords and 3 minor chords found in that key. One of the major chords that's part of the key of G major is the C major chord. So if I now want to play the C major chord in this context, the C major chord is still going to be in the same spot. So here's your C major chord in the G shape right here. Here's your note C, E, G, C, E, G, C. So here's the C major chord in the G shape right here. but it no longer lines up with position number 1. It lines up with position number 3. So you have your position number 3 of the G major pentatonic scale, and then your C major chord in the G shape. So it's all part of the C major chord is part of this key, but now it's not associated with position number 1 anymore. So that's the whole point I'm trying to get at here. So that's the point I want to get at here. So it's all about context. So the CAGED system, it doesn't change. The C major chord is always going to be a C major chord. The location of the chord tones of a C major chord are always going to be in the same spot. The notes C, E, and G are always going to be in the same spot of the fretboard regardless of the key that you're playing in. But the positions of the scale, we're looking at the pentatonic scale for this lesson, the positions of the pentatonic scale are going to change depending on which key you're in. So C major chord can be found in a couple keys. C major chord can be found in the key of C major. C major can be found in the key of G major. It can be found in the key of F major. It can be found used in a bunch of other keys as, like a borrowed chord or something like that, or an out of key chord. Same thing, borrowed chord is an out of key chord. But so C major can be found in a lot of different contexts. But if C major chord is used in the context of the C major scale, then everything works nicely. The positions of the pentatonic scale match up with a particular CAGED shape. Position 1 goes with G shape, position 2 goes with E shape, position 3 goes with D shape. That's if you're playing a C major chord in the context of C major scale. Once you switch the scale, once you switch the key, that overlap no longer is there anymore. So that's a very important thing to understand. So what does this mean for you? So if you're new to learning, the fretboard, if you're trying to figure out how to solo in key, just understand that there's 2 layers. Number 1, you have the key scale layer. You have to know how to play in key. And then number 2, you have to know how to target the chord tones, which is the more advanced stuff. Usually you start doing that, years into your guitar playing after you've already gotten good at playing up and down the fretboard in key. So, I like to call the in-key types of visualization systems where you're learning the layer 1 stuff, I like to call those dynamic systems. And then I like to call systems such as the CAGED systems static systems. That's the layer 2 stuff. So, some examples of dynamic systems would be the 5 pentatonic positions, the 3-note per string patterns. There's 7 different 3-note per string patterns that allows you to play the diatonic scale up and down the fretboard for whatever key you want to play in. I teach the diatonic scale using 3 patterns. I'll post a link to that lesson below. So those are all dynamic systems. Those all change based on what key you're in. So if you're in the key of C major, you kind of locate your pentatonic position number 1 right here. If you're in the key of G major, you locate your pentatonic position number 1 here. If you're in the key of F major, you locate your pentatonic position number 1 here between the 10th and the 13th fret. So depending on the key, depends on where you locate your reference positions. So that's why I call those dynamic fretboard visualization systems. But then if you're going to learn stuff such as maybe you want to memorize every note on the fretboard, that would be static. The notes on the fretboard are what they are. This is always going to be the note E. This is always going to be the note B. This is always going to be the note G. That doesn't change. No matter what key you're playing in, that's static. So the CAGED system is static like that. The CAGED system is a static system. It doesn't change. No matter what key you're playing in, a C major chord in the G shape is always going to be found right here. A C major chord in the E shape is always going to be found right here. It doesn't matter if that C major chord's being used in the key of F major, in the key of C major, in the key of G major, whatever. So you definitely want to have an understanding of the differences between these 2 types of visualization systems, because if you don't understand the difference, you're going to get confused very quickly. So what's the benefit of, associating a pentatonic position with a specific CAGED shape? Like I said, it only works if you're focusing on the C major chord in the key of C major, or if you're focusing on the G major chord in the key of G major, or if you're focusing on the B major chord in the key of B major. So if you're in a key and you're focusing on the 1 chord in that key, then you can kind of associate a shape with a pentatonic position. And that actually is something that you are going to be doing a lot. So say you want to solo over a chord progression that's in the key of, say, C major, and the chord progression has 3 chords in it. It's an F major chord, a G major chord, and a C major chord. The F major chord goes quick, the G major chord goes quick, but then the C major chord lasts for a long time. So the progression might sound something like this. So I'm holding out the C major chord for a while, but the F major chord and the G major chord are happening kind of quickly. So if I'm soloing over those 3 chords, I'm in the key of C major. The scale that I'm going to use the entire time would be the C major scale. That works over all the chords. If I want to just play the C major pentatonic, that's still part of the C major scale. It's just less notes. It's just the pentatonic notes. So that's all well and good. But because the C major chord is ringing out for extra long, I may want to kind of focus more on the chord tones of that chord. I may not want to worry about chord tones so much over the F major chord and over the G major chord because those chords are moving quickly. So I can just noodle over the F, noodle over the G, and then kind of really start to hone in on the C major chord tones. So this is a specific example of where this would be a good thing to associate, pentatonic positions and CAGED shapes. So as you can see in that demo, I was kind of noodling over the F major chord, I was noodling over the G major chord, and then when it got to the C major chord, I was kind of focusing on landing on notes, sustaining on notes that were also part of the C major chord. Part of the key, but also part of the chord. So the key scale is layer 1. Alright, so I was focusing on the key scale as my layer 1. That works all the time. But if I really want to get those perfect sounding notes, then I focus on layer 2, which is the chord tones, and I did that over the C major chord. So this is an instance where I was focusing on the one chord, the C major chord, within the context of C major. That's when this stuff kind of is useful. But if I'm in a different key or something like that, or even if I'm in this key, if I'm in the key of C major and I want to start focusing on the chord tones of other chords, like there's other chords that are in the key of C major. If I wanted to focus on the chord tones of the G major chord or the F major chord, then, the shapes aren't going to line up so nicely with the pentatonic positions anymore. So that's why this is kind of it's kind of good to differentiate the two. So pentatonic positions, that's a dynamic type of system. That's part of learning how to solo in key. CAGED system, that is layer number 2. That's a static thing that doesn't change. So it's 2 different methods of visualization. Understand the differences. Both have their point, both have their purpose. Both are very, very great systems to learn. You should learn them both, but they are different. All right, so that's going to be it for this lesson. Hopefully you guys were able to learn something. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to ask. I'll see you next time.